You sure you want to know? That's what my buddy Jake asked me when I told him I was starting to get suspicious about my wife. I laughed it off at the time, cracked a joke about how I wasn't trying to star in some daytime soap opera. But deep down, yeah, I wanted to know. Hell, I needed to. I'm David, 32. Father of 2 twins, actually, Matthew and Emma. They're 7, loud, and chaotic in all the best ways. My wife's name is Rachel. We met in college, fell fast and hard. Got married by 24. Bought a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Fort Collins, Colorado. I had a stable IT job. Rachel was a speech therapist. Nothing flashy. Just life, the way you hope it's supposed to go. But lately, it felt like someone had turned the volume down on our marriage. We weren't fighting all the time. We just weren't really talking either. You know what I mean? It was like we were two people quietly coexisting in the same house, tag-teaming kid duties, managing bills, doing laundry, cooking dinner. But love? Affection? Even just basic warmth? It all seemed to be drying up. Like a puddle in July. I noticed it first when she started coming home later than usual. Staff meetings, she said. Parent consultations ran long. And at first I bought it. I mean, she worked with kids. I figured those jobs can stretch long. But then it started happening all the time. 3, 4 nights a week. Sometimes she wouldn't even eat dinner with us. She'd walk in the door, kiss the kids, give me a half smile, and vanish upstairs to rest. That rest often looked like scrolling her phone with a little smirk on her face. I didn't jump to conclusions. I'm not that guy. Paranoid husbands are usually just projecting their own crap. But something in me stirred. I'd say instinct, but maybe it was just the sheer weight of repetition, like water slowly wearing a groove into stone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. So, I did what any semi-desperate, middle-class suburban dad does. I started asking around. Funny enough, it was during a backyard barbecue at Jake's house when the idea of counseling first came up. We were flipping burgers, talking about how tired we always felt, and I mentioned that Rachel and I had hit a weird patch. Jake just nodded, handed me a beer and said, "We did couples therapy last year. Thought I was gonna lose her. Turned out we just needed a third party to tell us we were both being idiots." At first, I brushed it off. But a few nights later, after Rachel shut me down again, emotionally, not physically, though there was that too, I brought it up. "Maybe we should see someone. Talk to a therapist." She looked at me like I suggested we join a cult. "We don't need therapy, David. We just need to actually spend time together. You're always working." Which, by the way, wasn't entirely fair. I worked from home most days. Sure, I had my nose in a laptop often, but it wasn't like I was running off to Vegas every weekend. Still, I let it go. For a while. But time passed. Things didn't get better. In fact, they got worse. We started arguing over stupid things. Who forgot to buy paper towels? Who left the garage light on? The twins started picking up on the tension. Emma asked me one night if Mommy was mad at me. That stung more than I cared to admit. So I pushed harder. "If we don't at least try therapy, I don't know where this is going," I told her one Sunday night, after another cold shoulder dinner. "I can't keep pretending like everything's fine." That time, something must have hit home. Maybe it was the look on my face. Maybe she was just tired of fighting. She sighed, looked down at her hands, and finally muttered, "Okay, we'll try." We found a counselor through one of Jake's old recommendations, a guy named Marcus Hill. Office downtown. Kind of soft-spoken, but smart. One of those guys who wore tweed jackets and probably smelled like leather and strong coffee. The first few sessions went surprisingly well. Rachel was guarded, but she opened up more than I expected. I laid my cards on the table too. We talked. We listened. It felt like progress. After about a month, Marcus suggested individual sessions. "To explore your own emotional work," he said. Sounded legit. Rachel agreed. I agreed. Whatever helped, right? Another month passed. That's when I started noticing something different. Rachel changed. Not in a bad way, at least not on the surface. She started smiling more, laughing with the kids, wearing makeup more often, even around the house. She seemed lighter, brighter, but not with me. That smile? It wasn't for me. That laugh? Not from anything I said. She was glowing, but I was still standing in the dark. Something was off. I just couldn't see the full picture yet. But I would. Oh, I would. And let me tell you, when the curtain finally dropped, what I saw backstage changed everything. I wish I could say I discovered everything in one clean, dramatic swoop. Like pulling back the curtain on a magic trick and bam, there's the ugly truth. But that's not how it happened. Real life doesn't always offer those cinematic moments. It was more like peeling an onion. Layer by layer. Tier by tier. After we started seeing Marcus individually, Rachel got elusive. Not distant in the cold shoulder way, but in that I'm here but not really here way. If you've ever lived with someone who's emotionally checked out, you know the feeling. They're physically in the same room, but might as well be on another planet. She stopped telling me where she was going. Or if she did, it was vague. Meeting up with Emily. Or, I need some time to myself. At first, I believed her. I mean, why wouldn't I? We were in therapy. We were working on things. And yeah, maybe I was naive. But being naive isn't a crime. Trusting your spouse shouldn't make you feel like a fool. I started noticing these little windows of time where she just disappeared. Couple hours here. Hour and a half there. Always some excuse. Grocery store. Book club. A walk. The usual white noise. But the pattern was off. Too frequent. Too convenient. One night, around 10 p.m., she came home smelling like vanilla perfume and something I couldn't place. Some kind of musky cologne that definitely didn't belong to me or our laundry detergent. When I asked about it, she barely looked up from her phone and mumbled something about sitting near some guy at the coffee shop. That was it for me. I decided to talk to Jake. Again. I remember pacing in my garage while we were on the phone. Kids asleep. Garage light flickering like it knew something was up. I need a favor, I said. Something big. Jake didn't even hesitate. Name it. I need you to follow Rachel. Just once or twice. See where she goes when she says she's at these meetings. I know how it sounds, man. I can't shake this feeling. There was a pause. Not judgmental, more like concern. Then he said, All right. I'll do it. You sure you want to know? Not even a little. But I have to. Jake's always been solid like that. Loyal to a fault. If he ever writes a memoir, I hope he gives me a chapter. He followed her twice. The first time she went to a spa and got a facial. Completely normal. I felt like an idiot for even asking. But the second time? That was the one. He called me around 9 p.m. She parked near Marcus's office. Okay, I said, trying to stay rational. Maybe a check-in session? Then she got in his car. My stomach dropped. What? She got in. They drove off. I followed them. They didn't go back to his office. They went to the Gray Lantern. The Gray Lantern. A fancy little restaurant on the edge of town. Dim lighting, private booths, expensive wine. A real date night spot. Rachel and I went there once a year for our anniversary, if we were lucky. What happened next? I asked, even though I already knew I didn't want to hear it. They were in there for over an hour. Came out laughing. Got back in the car. Drove to the Sycamore Inn. And there it was. The Sycamore Inn isn't exactly a Motel 6, but it's not the Ritz either. It's discreet. Quiet. You pay up front. No questions asked. Perfect place if you want to disappear for a few hours and come back pretending you're just late from errands. Jake continued. They went in together. Haven't come out yet. You want me to stay? No, I said quietly. You've done enough. I hung up and just sat there in the garage. Tools on the walls. Bike hanging from the ceiling. Kids' sidewalk chalk buckets by my feet. The normalcy of it all made it worse. Like the house itself didn't realize everything had just changed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, stunned, staring at a rusted hammer like it might give me answers. Rachel got home around midnight. Said she was with her friend Emily again. Told me they'd lost track of time. I nodded. That's all I did. I nodded. Like a clown. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed next to her, listening to her breathe, trying to reconcile the woman beside me with the one laughing in a booth with another man. Not just any man, our therapist. The guy I trusted to help us fix our marriage. Turns out he was busy fixing something else. That's when I decided to go pro. No more amateur stakeouts. I needed answers, but I needed them with evidence. Cold, hard, printable evidence. The next day, I hired a private investigator. Cost me more than a few weekends of splurging, but it was worth it. He told me, "Give me 3 weeks. I'll find out everything." 3 weeks. That was all it took. What he uncovered. Let's just say, I thought the betrayal stopped with Rachel and Marcus. I was wrong. So very wrong. So here's the thing they don't tell you about hiring a PI. It's not like the movies. There's no trench coat, no binoculars from a parked car across the street. It's a guy in jeans with a coffee stain on his shirt, a dash cam, and way too much experience catching people who think they're being clever. His name was Clint. Ex-military, polite, and terrifyingly efficient. We met at a greasy diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where the seats are torn and the coffee tastes like old regrets. "You want to know what she's doing," he said, flipping open a plain black notebook. "That's what I do. But I'll warn you now, if you're not ready to hear it, don't ask me to dig." I didn't hesitate. "Dig." He nodded once. "All right." The next 3 weeks were a blur. I kept it together at work, smiled for the kids, pretended everything was fine, but my stomach was in knots all the time. Like I had swallowed a bag of nails, and was just waiting for them to shift. Rachel, meanwhile, kept glowing. She was practically floating through the house, humming, texting, making fresh smoothies every morning like she was starring in some Instagram lifestyle video. She even started working out again. Bought new yoga clothes. Got her hair done. But not once, did she look at me the way she used to. You know what I mean? That look that says, "I'm home now." Instead, it was like I was the roommate she barely tolerated. Then Clint called. "You might want to sit down," he said. I was already sitting, but somehow I felt the urge to lie down anyway. "She's still seeing the therapist," I figured. But not just in his office. They've met up at least 4 times at restaurants. Twice at the Sycamore Inn. And once at his house. His house? Yeah. Guy's got a place on the west side, kind of tucked into the foothills. Expensive taste. Of course he does. But then Clint paused. I could tell he was holding something back. "There's more," he said, voice a little lower. That's never a good sign. "Turns out, she's not the only one. There's another woman. Redhead. Mid-30s. Married." I didn't say anything. "And she's married to someone you know." I sat up straighter. "His name's Colin Matthews. Jake's best friend. One of the guys who vouched for Marcus in the first place." "No way," I muttered. "Oh, there's more," Clint added. "I did some light background work on Marcus. He's not just dating 2 married women. He's got a third." "A third?" Clint sent me a photo. The third woman looked familiar, but I couldn't place her right away. Took me a few minutes to realize who she was. Then it hit me. She was the wife of the guy who owns the coffee shop downtown. The one Rachel always said she met her friends at. 3 married women. Same guy. Same therapist. I was quiet for a long time. Then I asked the one question I really didn't want the answer to. "You think this was part of his plan all along?" Clint didn't even pause. "I think this is what he does. Gets women in vulnerable spots. Builds trust. Exploits it. I've seen it before. I hung up and stared at the wall for a while. Couldn't think. Couldn't feel much either. I wasn't even angry. I just felt empty. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left a wax figure in my place. But after a few hours of sitting in that, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I called Jake. When I told him what I found, there was silence on the line. Then a soft, disbelieving, "No way. Oh, it gets better," I said bitterly. "The second woman? It's Colin's wife." "Dude, that's insane." "No, what's insane is that you recommended him to me." "Whoa, hold on," Jake snapped. "I didn't know. I swear to you. Colin told me he helped them, and it turned things around for him and his wife. I had no idea this was going on." We met up that night. 2 beers in, Jake was pacing in my garage, hands on his head, just muttering, "What the hell?" over and over. Eventually, I looked at him. "We need to tell Colin." He stopped pacing. Yeah, we do." And so we did. The next day, we drove to Colin's place and laid it all out. The photos, the PI's report, everything. Colin went pale, then red, then dead quiet. It was his silence that scared me more than anything. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't denying it. He just nodded slowly and whispered, "I knew something was off, but I didn't think, not with him." And then he said, "We're gonna burn this guy to the ground." That's when the plan started forming. 3 men. 3 betrayed husbands. 1 manipulative therapist. If that guy thought he was smart, he hadn't met 3 very pissed-off middle-class dads with nothing left to lose. Oh yeah, the revenge part's coming. But we weren't there yet. First, we had to find husband number 3. Because the story? It wasn't done unraveling yet. Finding the 3rd guy turned out to be easier than expected. Clint had already pulled license plate data from one of the photos and traced it back to a man named Eric Donnelly. Lived on the south side of town. Worked in finance. Married for 10 years, 2 kids, golden retriever, the whole Norman Rockwell package. I didn't know him personally, but Colin did. Said they used to serve on a school fundraising board together. "Good guy," he said. "Does CrossFit, but I won't hold that against him." We debated for a while. Do we tell him? Do we stay out of it? But in the end, there was no question. If I was in his shoes, I'd want to know. And let's be honest, it wasn't about kindness at that point. It was strategy. The more of us who knew the truth, the stronger we were. We weren't just angry husbands anymore. We were a coalition. We met Eric at a coffee shop one afternoon. Neutral territory. He showed up in a blue polo and khakis, the picture of suburban stability. He even smiled when he sat down. "What's this about, fellas?" Colin didn't waste time. "It's about your wife. And her therapist." Eric blinked, confused. "Jenny? What about her therapist?" Jake slid a manila envelope across the table like we were in a spy movie. Clint had prepared it. Photos, timelines, even a breakdown of all 3 women's patterns. Eric opened it and went dead still. No reaction. Just stared. 1 photo at a time. Eventually, he closed the envelope, set it down, and leaned back in his chair. His voice was flat. "I knew something wasn't right." Same words I'd said. Same words Colin had said. That's the thing about this kind of betrayal. It doesn't come out of nowhere. You feel it before you see it. You just try so hard not to believe it, you end up gaslighting yourself. "I thought it was in my head," Eric said. "I thought I was being paranoid. She said I was too jealous, too possessive. And this guy? Marcus? She swore he was helping her become more independent." I remember that line. Helping me find myself. Rachel said the same thing. Maybe they all did. Eric looked up at us, something sharp now in his eyes. "So what do we do?" And that was it. The crew was assembled. You ever see that scene in a heist movie where they lay out the plan with blueprints on a table, and everyone's nodding like they're about to knock over Fort Knox? Yeah, it wasn't exactly like that, but close enough. We met in Colin's garage that Friday. Kids at sleepovers, wives, well, ex-wives to be, none the wiser. We had beer, takeout, and 3 bulletproof cases for phones. Clint joined us too. Quiet guy, but smart. Tactical. So what's the goal? He asked. You guys want to expose him to his clients? Call the ethics board? Post a YouTube expose? We looked at each other. No, I said. We want to end him. Professionally. Make sure he never does this to anyone else again. Jake chimed in. And humiliate him. That's key. Clint smiled slightly. All right then. You'll like this. Turns out, Marcus had a little side hustle going. He marketed himself online not just as a licensed therapist, but as a relationship guru. YouTube videos, blog posts, podcasts with cringe titles like Emotional Depth for Modern Men. He had a decently sized following. Nothing viral, but enough that his ego was clearly invested in it. Perfect. Here was the plan. We gather airtight evidence of his relationships with all 3 women. Texts, photos, recordings, Clint had it all, and leaked them anonymously to the state licensing board and his followers. Bonus points, we coordinated so everything dropped the same day. But the real twist? We were going to use his own words against him. See, Marcus had done a livestream Q&A a few months back. In it, he answered a question about therapist-client boundaries. Said, and I quote, "A therapist who crosses romantic lines with a client should never practice again. It's the deepest breach of trust." Yeah, buddy. We saved the clip. We also found some real gems in the podcast where he preached emotional monogamy and called infidelity a symptom of emotional cowardice. You couldn't write better irony. Clint drafted the email to the state board. I edited the copy for the press release, my first time doing PR, but hey, when you're motivated, you learn fast. Eric offered to contact a local journalist under an alias. Colin handled the anonymous tip to Marcus's followers, even made a Burr Reddit account to post the receipts. Launch day? We called it the Apocalypse. And man, when it hit hard. By noon, Marcus's practice website was down. His YouTube channel got flagged and then removed. Reddit was on fire. The licensing board acknowledged receipt of serious allegations under investigation. His assistant quit publicly. Clients started leaving reviews calling him a predator in disguise. That night, Rachel called me. I didn't answer. She texted, "Did you have something to do with this?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "I thought he was helping you find yourself. Turns out you both lost everything." I didn't send it. Just deleted the draft and turned off my phone. The truth was, I didn't care about Rachel anymore, not in the way I used to. The man I was before? The husband who'd bent himself backward trying to make her smile? That guy was gone. But I wasn't bitter. I was clean. We'd exposed the fraud. Burned him down to his foundation. And now? Now it was time to rebuild. On my own terms. After the fallout, things got real quiet for a few days. You know that silence after a storm? Not peaceful silence, the eerie kind. Like everything's just holding its breath, waiting to see what's still standing. Well, I was still standing. Barely, but standing. Marcus? Not so much. 2 days after the apocalypse, his office was shuttered. A sign on the door said, "Closed until further notice," which is PR speak for, "This guy's cooked." The state board opened an official ethics investigation. And from what Clint told us, 3 more former clients came forward. All women. All saying things like, "He crossed lines, made me feel like I owed him. He blurred the boundaries." Classic predator playbook. We didn't cheer. We didn't throw a party. I mean, we crushed the guy professionally, sure, but none of us felt like winners. This wasn't a victory lap. It was damage control. You don't feel good about torching someone when you know what it cost you to get there. I'd lost my marriage. Colin too. Eric was filing papers. And Rachel? She was finally fully exposed. See, when her little house of cards collapsed, she did what people like her always do. She panicked. Tried to spin it. Claimed Marcus manipulated her. That she was, emotionally vulnerable. That it wasn't really an affair, it was an unfortunate therapeutic entanglement. Nice try. Didn't play well with the court. We'd all quietly lawyered up weeks earlier, just waiting for the right moment. And when the news hit, I served her the papers that Monday. Left them in a manila envelope on the kitchen table, right next to the espresso machine she bought for herself when things started to get better. She texted me, frantic. Rachel, we don't have to do this like this. Can we talk first? Me, we tried talking. You took it somewhere else. Rachel, I'm sorry. I made mistakes. But you're blowing this way out of proportion. I didn't reply. She followed up. Rachel, we have a family. What about the kids? Yeah. The kids. That part cut the deepest. Matthew and Emma didn't know everything yet. Just that Mom and Dad were having a hard time. That Dad was sleeping in the guest room. That sometimes people love each other, but can't live together anymore. Try explaining that to a 7-year-old who still believes in the tooth fairy. I'd been talking to a child therapist about how to break it to them gently. I wanted to do it right. Protect them from the shrapnel. Because no matter what happened between me and Rachel, those two were my everything. Still are. And Rachel, she wanted shared custody. Which, on paper, sounded fair. But I couldn't trust her judgment anymore. The woman who thought sneaking around with our therapist during counseling was excusable? Yeah, not exactly Mom of the Year material. I didn't want to punish her. I just wanted to protect the kids. So my lawyer and I pushed for primary custody with supervised transition time. Not out of vengeance, just logic. It got ugly fast. Her lawyer threw every cliché in the book at us. My client was emotionally coerced. She felt isolated. The marital breakdown was mutual. I brought receipts, emails, texts, phone records, Clint's report, her own admission, captured, lovingly, in a therapy session transcript she'd sent me once. Oh yeah, I kept everything. The judge didn't say much at first. Just flipped through the file slowly, eyebrows doing this slow dance of disbelief. Then he looked up and said, I've seen a lot of divorce cases, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. But this is unique. You could say that again. In the end, I got what I asked for, primary custody. Rachel got weekends and some midweek time, with a court-appointed mediator involved for the first 6 months. She wasn't happy. But she didn't fight it. I think somewhere deep down, even she knew she torched too much. The funny part? You'd think this would be the low point. But it wasn't. Not by a long shot. See, once the legal dust settled and Marcus faded into oblivion, something else started happening, something I didn't expect. I felt free. Not right away. At first, it was like standing in a burned-down house, looking around at all the ashes and thinking, well, at least there's no more fire. But then, slowly, I started to rebuild. Mornings with the twins became the highlight of my day. Pancakes on Saturdays. Lego battles in the living room. I even started taking them to the rock climbing gym on Sundays. Just me, 2 harnesses, and a lot of scraped knees. I also reconnected with myself, whatever was left of me. Started running again, playing guitar. Reading books that had nothing to do with how to save your marriage. I deleted the apps. Canceled the subscriptions. Let go of the need to fix something that had been broken long before I realized it. Colin and Eric and I, we stayed close. Not just, let's grab a beer sometime. Close. I mean real, battle-tested, Trench Brothers kind of close. We joked that we should start a podcast. Fail, when the doctor's the disease. We didn't, of course. But the joke helped. Humor always does. Eventually, Rachel stopped trying to patch things up. I think she finally accepted what I'd known for a while. Some things don't come back. Trust is one of them. Love, maybe. But trust? Once it's gone like a blown fuse. You can try all you want, but the light's never coming back on. I didn't know it at the time, but the moment I signed the final divorce papers, I didn't just end a marriage. I unlocked a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. You hear people say stuff like that and think, yeah, okay, Dr. Phil, but I'm telling you, it was real. That next morning, I woke up in my own house, my house, with the sun pouring in and not a single knot in my chest. No fake smiles across the breakfast table. No eggshells. Just peace. And a very loud Emma asking for pancakes with exactly 6 chocolate chips per pancake or else. It was the first time in a long time I laughed, really laughed. The twins adjusted faster than I expected. I guess that's the upside to being 7. Their world is you, your hugs, their favorite snacks, and bedtime stories. As long as those stay intact, everything else is background noise. I kept things stable. Structure. Routines. I made it my job to protect their innocence. Rachel didn't make that part hard. She showed up when she was supposed to, didn't start drama, and stuck to her court-appointed hours. I think part of her was still reeling from the public wreckage of Marcus Hill, love doctor and emotional Sherpa, going full meltdown on local news. Yeah, forgot to mention that. Turns out, Marcus tried to make a comeback on camera. Did a sit-down interview with a local station, tried to explain his emotional connection with these women as complex healing work. The segment ran once. The station pulled it within 24 hours after viewer backlash. And just like that, the guru became the cautionary tale. Meanwhile, I got back to living. First thing I did? Redid the garage. Total dad move, I know. But it was symbolic. The place where I first started connecting the dots. Where Jake and I cracked beers and broke down my failing marriage under flickering lights and spider webs. I power washed it, painted the floor, put up new storage. Turned it into a small gym and workspace. That was my therapy. And then, there was the crew. Jake, Colin, Eric and I started meeting every Saturday morning. No agenda. Sometimes breakfast, sometimes just coffee and bad jokes. We kept each other grounded. Reminded one another that yeah, we've been burned, but not broken. Eric got a promotion. Colin started dating again. Jake finally bought that stupid motorcycle he'd been talking about for a decade. Me? I didn't rush anything. I wasn't swearing off relationships forever, but I needed time. Not to heal, I was past that, but to recalibrate. To remember who I was before I got lost in someone else's mess. I'd wake up early, go for a run, come home, and make breakfast with the kids blasting music way too loud. I rebuilt old hobbies. Guitar, sketching. Even joined a local dad's group, which sounds corny as hell, but turned out to be one of the smartest things I've ever done. Turns out there are a lot of us out there. Guys who got blindsided, guys who stayed too long, guys who left too late. We shared stories. Some tragic. Some ridiculous. One guy said his wife left him for her yoga instructor and their cat. Not even kidding. We laughed. We commiserated. And we moved forward. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, something unexpected happened. I ran into Rachel at the kids' school. Parent-teacher conference night. It was awkward, sure, but civil. She looked different. Tired. Not physically, just emotionally drained. Like someone who had finally stepped off the roller coaster, but couldn't remember why she got on in the first place. We sat on opposite ends of the table, while the teacher talked about Matthew's spelling and Emma's obsession with marine animals. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Rachel looked at me and said, "You're doing a great job with him." I nodded. "So are you." "They're lucky." We both knew it was just a polite exchange. But still, it meant something. Maybe not redemption. Maybe not forgiveness. But recognition. Afterward, I walked the twins to the car and Emma said, "Daddy, why does Mommy look sad now?" I looked at her through the rearview mirror and said the only thing I could. Sometimes grown-ups get sad when they remember what they lost. She didn't ask any more questions. Just looked out the window and started humming. A few weeks later, I found myself at a hardware store. Saturday morning. Wandering aimlessly, looking for a new rake I didn't actually need. That's when I met someone. No, I didn't crash into her around the corner or knock over a display. This wasn't a rom-com. She just asked if I knew anything about power drills. I didn't, but I pretended I did. We laughed. We talked. Her name was Claire. Divorced, 1 kid, sharp wit, and a smile that didn't look rehearsed. We didn't start dating right away, but we exchanged numbers. You know what felt weird? I wasn't nervous. After everything I had been through, this felt simple, human, honest. We met for coffee the next week, then a walk in the park. No pressure. No big expectations. Just 2 people learning how to exist in the world again, without pretending. It's wild, looking back now. A year ago, I was staring at the ceiling every night wondering if my marriage was salvageable. Now, I sleep soundly. Not because everything's perfect, but because I'm not lying to myself anymore. Life doesn't hand you closure in a nice envelope. You build it. One hard conversation, one honest choice, one pancake breakfast at a time. And if you're lucky, you come out the other side not just okay, but better. Claire and I didn't rush anything. That was the rule, unspoken but understood. I wasn't looking to dive headfirst into another serious relationship, and she wasn't either. We were 2 people who'd been burned, who still smelled the smoke, and neither of us wanted to start another fire. But I liked her. She asked questions. Real ones. Not, what do you do, but, what do you like about being a dad? And when I told her about building a mini rock wall in the garage for the twins, she smiled like that actually meant something. We kept things casual. Met once a week. Coffee, a movie, a walk downtown. Nothing big. But each time, I left feeling like myself again. Not the guy who got cheated on. Not the guy who blew up his marriage. Just me. The kids didn't know about her, not yet. I wasn't ready to bring that into their world. It wasn't about hiding anything. It was about protecting what little stability they had left. Jake, Colin, and Eric all gave me a hard time about it. So when do we get to meet this mystery woman? Jake asked one Saturday. When you guys learn how to act like adults in front of company. I shot back. Eric laughed. So, never. The thing is, they were happy for me. Genuinely. We'd all come out the other side of a train wreck, and now we were slowly figuring out what a new life could look like. Colin had moved into a new apartment, close to his kids' school. Eric was talking about buying a boat, completely impractical, but the guy was giddy like a teenager with a driver's license. And me? I finally stopped checking Rachel's social media. That might sound small, but it was a turning point. Letting go, not out of anger, but because I just didn't care anymore. Whatever she was doing wasn't my business. Not anymore. A few weeks later, Rachel called me out of the blue. Not a text. Not a forwarded school message or calendar reminder. A real call. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Hey, I said. She paused. Hi. I was wondering if we could talk. Not about the kids. Just us. That old feeling stirred in my chest for a second. Not longing, more like someone knocking on a door I thought I'd sealed shut. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. She exhaled. I'm not trying to win you back. I know that ship sailed. I just wanted to apologize. For real. No excuses. I didn't say anything, she continued. I messed up. With Marcus. With you. With everything. And I see it now. I see what I lost. I still didn't speak. It's not about getting anything from you, she said. I just needed to say it. After a long pause, I said, okay. I hear you. And that was it. I didn't hang up on her. Didn't argue. I just let her say her piece, and when she was done, we ended the call. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like the final flicker of a fire finally dying out. And oddly enough, it brought me peace. That weekend, I told Claire about the call. She didn't get weird or jealous. Just nodded and asked, how do you feel? I thought about it. Then answered, free. Later that night, I sat on the back porch with a beer in hand, the kids already asleep, and just stared up at the stars. No regrets. No anger. Just a man who survived hell, came out clean, and finally felt like he was living again. A month later, Claire met the kids. It was a simple afternoon. Park, picnic, soccer ball. Nothing formal, nothing forced. Just 4 people on a blanket with juice boxes and too many goldfish crackers. Emma immediately took to her. Started asking questions like, "Do you like whales?" and "Can you braid hair?" Claire didn't flinch. She said whales were amazing and gave Emma a quick, lopsided braid that somehow won her over completely. Matthew was quieter. That's his style. Observant. He kept kicking the soccer ball in her direction, like he was testing her footwork. She passed every time. Afterwards, as we drove home, Emma said, "She's nice." Matthew nodded, looking out the window. "She plays fair." That's when I knew they were okay. And honestly, that meant more to me than anything Claire or I had said to each other. Rachel found out later, through the kids, of course. I braced myself for a dramatic text or a guilt trip. Instead, she sent, "I'm glad you're finding peace. I really am." Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But for once, I didn't feel the need to dissect it. Because at that point, I wasn't carrying her anymore. I wasn't carrying the betrayal, the what-ifs, the shame. I had set all of it down. The house was quiet that night, and I realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man waiting for the next fight. I felt like a man living. 6 months after the divorce, I stood in my backyard one evening, grilling burgers while the twins chased each other around the lawn. Claire sat at the patio table, flipping through a book and occasionally calling out a laugh when Emma yelled something ridiculous. It was quiet, comfortable. No tension hanging in the air. No second-guessing every word. No pretending. Just life. Simple. Good. It hit me then, not like a thunderbolt, but something softer. A quiet realization. I made it. Not survived. Moved on. A year ago, I was digging through lies. Paying a PI to confirm what my gut already knew. Watching a life I built start to crack like old paint on the side of a house. Now, I was building something new. Something real. Not perfect, but honest. Rachel and I had settled into something resembling decent co-parenting. No drama. Just a shared goal. Raise the kids without turning them into baggage handlers for our mistakes. Colin was seeing someone new. A nurse, I think. Eric bought his boat. He named it Second Wind. Fitting. And Jake? Still single. Still riding that ridiculous motorcycle. But happier than I'd seen him in years. We still met up. Still swapped stories, gave each other grief, celebrated the wins. Divorce had brought us together in the worst way, and somehow turned us into a family. I took a bite of a slightly burnt burger that night and smiled. Wasn't the life I planned. But man, it was starting to feel like the life I deserved. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, write a comment and put a like. Also listen to other stories. Bye. You're the best.